Welcome back for another Sins of a Solar Empire 2 video. Today we are analyzing the Vasari Defensor corvette. This is a corvette that we get in the first level of research. The game assigns it as a quick hybrid corvette capable of shooting down missiles, strike craft, and other corvettes. Does it really live up to that? I think we're going to look at it, and I'm going to say that yeah, it does. So to start with, this is an unupgraded Defensor that we're looking at here. So it comes out of the gate with 410 shield points, has 180 armor points with an armor strength of 18, 460 hull points, and I didn't mention the 0 durability. All corvettes in this game come out with 0 durability, so that's not unique. That's intended, and I think rightfully so. It does have a max speed that got bumped up in this last patch of 960, and then the weapons is 2 light pulse guns that do 3 DPS apiece at 90 pierce. It shows 3.1 on the card because you literally cannot get it without the Warfare 1 and the 3% weapon damage on the tier. And then the 2 point defense pulse guns with 2.1 DPS and 0 pierce. We'll look at the weapons really quickly. There's not much to really say here. The light pulse does have the ability to turn, so we're going to look at it. I can't look at it this way. So it does have this green line, so it's got this purple arc all the way around. This is your center point here. For the pulse guns, there's one on either side, and they kind of just shoot very straight. They can shoot on their own side. They have, it looks to be about 75, would be my guess. Somewhere between 70 and 75 or 80 or so. Maybe not quite 80. About a 70% arc or 70 degree arc towards the side, and then 360 around, so it can shoot forwards, backwards, but mostly tries to shoot in front of itself. And this particular weapon, the light pulse itself, will shoot at ships mostly, and not strike craft, not missiles, and will shoot at corvettes, but will not shoot at anything smaller than that. The point defense pulse guns is mostly the main reason I say that we'd be getting this for damage or for our fleet rather than the Tusarek Raider. What was the one thing I forgot? I forgot to talk about supply. 4 supply and a cost of 60 metal and 35 crystal. So early in the game, we have basically a 2 crystal income. I think this planet ended up having something extra on it, but we get 2 crystal per second early game, and so we kind of really barely can afford this if we build them one at a time, just with our home planet income. All right, back to the weapon. So point defense is mounted on the upper part of the ship. It is this dot here and this green weapon arc, so you can see it's about the same as the light pulse guns, where it can shoot almost everything on its side of the ship. It looks like it kind of divides down the middle, and one shoots off this way, one shoots off this way, so you really have 1 point defense per side. There's no skills on it, so we're not going to talk about skills. So really what we're going to talk about is we'll go into upgrades first, and then we'll talk about some matchups and what they're good at. So the only weapon on this ship is the pulse weapons. So both the point defense and the pulse weapons get upgrades from the pulse tree. First one being 6%, second one being 18%, third one being 30%, and then the last one being 42%. So you can get up to Basically you almost bump up to 4.5, but not quite. So close to like 4.2 on those pulse guns, and then the point defense pulse cannons really don't get you that high. They get close to 3, and that's just a little bit under 3. What is unique though about this ship is the precise turret servos available in Tier 2 warfare. You do get a point defense tracking speed upgrade of 20% and a weapon range on those point defense of 15%. If you are going defensors, actually I would say that really anything, because you can see what unlocks here is it's on the oppressor, it's on the transporter, it's on the defensor, and then it's on 3 of our capital ships, not the Volcaris and not the Devastator. So really the egg that we start with, and then the carrier and the support marauder. It's also on our Titan, and then also our Warden. So I wouldn't say that this is something we typically skip. We usually get it when we can afford it, but it's still something that we should get somewhere in Tier 2, maybe on our way to Tier 3 maybe if we have to, but it's still something we get kind of regardless at this point. This ship itself does like the hull increases. Anything to survivability. Corvettes are kind of masters at dodging some damage. So any additional damage that it can soak, if it does dodge the damage, is a good thing. So we want to get the hull on this ship as well. Same with the regen. Because it is so nimble, we want the hull regen just because any additional survivability is a good thing. And then same thing with upgrading the hull regeneration, armor regeneration. Anything that we can get is a bonus to keeping the ship alive. I do have some numbers that we can talk about shortly when we start getting into some matchups that I think are right. And obviously if anybody finds anything different, I appreciate any feedback. Armor strength. This ship does have a little bit of armor, but it only has an 18 armor strength. So almost everything that can shoot this is piercing it no matter what. So adding the extra strength really doesn't do anything for us. But having the extra armor points is okay to get, just because armor translates to extra health. And in this case kind of almost equates to hull itself. The turn speed and the acceleration are good because these are so small. They are fairly fast. They accelerate very quickly, and because of the way that they target ships, they turn very quickly as well. Same with the flawless armor. But I would say that the most critical for this ship is the regenerative shielding. Getting into combat and having a shield regen on something that is nimble to hit, doubling it with hull regen, is always a good thing in my opinion. So getting this at Tier 2 is important. Getting the max shield and the extra regen in Tier 2 is also important. Phase attenuated shields, capital ships. Reverse engineered shields. So I can go over some numbers on this as well. So the shield burst has a 15-second cooldown. So if your shield pops and you get into armor or you get into hull, all you have to do is not die for 15 seconds, and your shield will come back at 50% strength, which is, in my opinion, a good thing. Chances are by the time you get to Tier 3, you are building a lot fewer of them, just because you'll have the oppressor for some point defense. You'll probably have the Junsrak Warden for some point defense. So really, you'd be using this to, we'll get into that later. Just wanted to talk about that it's a 15-second shield burst while I had my notes available. All right, going into some details. So the point defense guns on this ship do 3 damage per shot. Typically when I do talk about point defense, or when I talk about stats in general, I don't talk about an actual per shot damage, but because point defense and the way that missiles interact, we actually need to know how much damage the point defense will do on a given shot. So it does 3 damage per point defense shot at a 1.5 second reload. Why that's important, I'll get into shortly. The biggest thing that we end up fighting in Tier 1 and Tier 2 are against Advent. It will be against either the Advent Corvette, which I don't think hardly anybody is building those early in the game anyway. The Advent Tempest, which is supposed to be the counter to the Defensor, and then the Aria drone host from the Advent, because it also has fighters and bombers in it. And then obviously the Guardian, but we don't really interact with the Guardian as much. We're really interacting with things that we're shooting missiles down, or we're shooting fighters down, or we're shooting corvettes down. So why the 3 damage is important per shot is if you have 2 Defensors for every 1 Tempest that an enemy has, you can shoot both of the missiles out of the air before they can hit and do damage to your Defensors. Tempest missiles at base have 5 health on them, which means you only need to hit 2-point defense shots to knock down a single missile. In the most recent patch, I think it's 1.4 is the patch, the Tempests were, I'm going to say, heavily nerfed. Back in the previous patch, they were shooting 8 missiles per volley, which caused more headaches with missile tracking than it did with actually point defense. What would end up happening is, because they would shoot basically on one side of the ship, they would shoot 4 within like a 1.5 or it was a very short duration. It was like 1 second or 1.25 seconds. What your ship would do is it would start trying to track one of the missiles, and then a new one would get into a closer range. And the way that tracking works is it's always looking at the nearest missile. So rather than actually doing point defense and shooting some of those missiles down, it would more get confused by what was in the air, and it would never actually point defense anything. So the Tempest was able to put out a significant amount of missiles, which confused our targeting more than anything else. Since that patch, the Tempest now shoots 2 missiles on a much shorter cooldown instead of 8. And I don't believe the damage changed, but I can be corrected by an Advent player if I'm wrong, that the total DPS has not changed from the Tempest, but the firing rate and the firing mechanism has. So the change to the mechanism has given us a bump up on the Tempests. And as I said, if you have 2 Defensors, you can fight 1 Tempest and knock all of the missiles out before they hit any of your Defensors. You are in a supply deficit to do that, where you've basically spent 8 supply to their 6. So you end up having, you'll have to basically have more Defensors in the air that for supply than they will have Tempests in the air as well. Couple other tests. If you do 8 Tempests versus 16 Defensors, it's a 7-minute fight, because you lose all of your DPS on your pulse defense gun, because it's only shooting at missiles at that point. You are doing 3.1 DPS on a 90 pierce weapon, and Tempests have 200 durability. It takes you about 7 minutes to fight the Tempests. However, you win where you only lose a single Defensor to them losing all 8 Tempests. So, in my opinion, I think that the matchup probably has shifted towards Defensor spam, which would allow you to manage their missiles in the air. And just in general. And I know that those are different supply variants. I know that there's only 48 supply of Tempests to the 64 of the Defensor, but basically having a 2-to-1 ratio means that you win, and win fairly heavily as the Defensor player. The next matchup I checked is the Carriers, the Aria Drone Host versus the Defensor, and I ran a couple of different scenarios. I did 2 Carriers with the default loadout, which is 2 fighter squadrons and 1 bomber squadron. So it was a total of 40 supply versus 10 Defensors, which is also a total of 40 supply. And that fight also took about 7 minutes. However, the Defensor eventually does gain air superiority in that fight, and it does take a bit. But eventually you do knock all the bombers and fighters out of the air. You eventually kill both of the carriers, and you lose essentially 3 Defensors to do so. So not as good as the Tempest fight as far as the ratio, but it is Defensor favored per supply on that one. And then I ran the same thing again with 4 drone hosts versus 20 Defensors. Same thing where it was a 2 fighter squads to 1 bomber squad, and you beat all 4 drone hosts and only lose a total of 3 Defensors. So, and that's unupgraded on everything, meaning no shields, no bonuses, damages, no bonus in range or tracking. So the Defensor's quite capable, in my opinion, of going supply for supply with the drone host. If the enemy does go full fighters, I was unable to test that myself in this one, but I imagine that it's probably also going to be fairly similar. Maybe you lose 3 or 4 Defensors, but once you get to the point where you are killing fighters quicker than they can rebuild them, which I believe is either 30 or 35 seconds, might even be 40. Once you're to the point where you're killing them quicker than they can rebuild them, you gain control of the air, and the Defensors that you have left essentially can almost one-shot the fighter when it comes out of the drone host. Against the Corvette for the Advent, you win hands down with little to no losses. I don't think that I lost a single one, and I even heavily favored the Advent Corvette in the fight, and I think I lost 1 Defensor and beat all the rest of them. So in Tier 1 and Tier 2, it's my opinion that the Defensor just kind of beats pretty much everything that Advent can really throw at them at this point in the early Tier 1, Tier 2. And really the only thing that you need to be afraid of as the Vasari player is if the enemy does go with the Halcyon carrier as its first starting ship. It can get a significant amount of fighters out, and it rebuilds squads instead of doing one at a time. So if it's got 7 or 8 squads, it's rebuilding fighters individually for all of those at once. So it can quickly get fighters back out. Telekinetic push does need to do more damage, which I believe the developers have said that they're going to look at buffing it in the next patch. So telekinetic push actually does damage to the Defensors, pushes them away from the carrier itself, and slows them, which gives other ships a chance to shoot at them. So I think it's necessary because based on everything that I've tested, that Defensor spam in Tier 1 and Tier 2 was winning most everything against the Advent. And I don't like when a single ship is winning something super heavily. Onto the tech. I did 10 Defensors versus 10 Gardas. Gardas did get a durability improvement in this last patch. I believe they bumped up from 100 durability to 200 durability, which really is a decrease on whatever damage our point defense guns was doing to them, which I think was a necessary move for the balancing purposes. The 10 versus 10, and I believe that the supply count is the same. So so we're spending 4 supply for a defensor. I believe that Gardas are also 4 supply. So I did 10 count versus 10 count, and the Gardas initially were losing, and they lost the first ship, but ended up catching back up and owning the air, and then won essentially, and had 7 left at the end of the fight. So they eventually won fairly handily. Against the Tier 2 carriers, I should say that against the Tech Corvette, again, not even close. This is the anti-Corvette in the game as the Defensor, so the Shurikens lost pretty handily as well. And then the last one I checked was the Tech Carrier Cruiser. And again, that one was about the same as the Advent. Once the air superiority is gained by the Defensor, you're killing fighters and bombers quicker than they can be reproduced by the carrier. So I think ultimately what I learned with that situation is that unupgraded, the Defensor has a advantage against both factions' ability to fight them early. I think that the later a game goes, the more air an enemy might have, or the more ability to shoot at air they able to have. I did not check the Garda Mark II versus the Defensor. I did not check the Tech double fighter into their carriers. And I did not check anything like with SOVA support or with any of the other capital ships with fighters as support. But in the vacuum that I was able to test it, the Defensor was coming out on top. And that was an unupgraded Defensor as well. Where it started to lose was it would lose to Illuminators in Tier 3 for the Advent. I did 40 supply versus 40 supply, which is only it's 10 Defensors and only 4 Illuminators now with the recent patch from 8 supply to 10 supply on the Advent, and it was not even close. The Illuminators absolutely cleared the sky of them, and I think I only broke the shield of 1 Illuminator in the entirety of the fight. So the Defensor just was not cracking the Illuminators' damage. And that's it that I've got for matchups. As far as the ability to, or the other things I wanted to talk about is at Tier 3, which is what I fought the Illuminators with. I did give myself all of the defensive upgrades that you would have once you get to Tier 3, as well as the damage increase and the precise turret servos up to Tier 3. And as I said, you were not... the Defensor was unable to match supply for supply. However, some of the things that I did learn at Tier 3 is when you have your shield regenning, you are getting 1.8 shield regen per second against Illuminators. And then hull regen is also 1.8 per second. So your shield continues to regen while in combat, which is why you get those upgrades. And I believe I said that this is I would argue, the most important technology that this ship gets in Tier 2. And even in Tier 3, I think having this is critical. And then once you get to reverse engineered shields, you get 15% more max shield. And then you get the shield burst, which is only 15 seconds. And unless your corvettes are being focus fired, which I would argue should never be done, as you should never be focus firing these, it will most likely get shield bursts off left and right and keep itself in the fight that much longer. Other things about this ship, it is quite easy to spam. I think I already discussed it. It's 18 seconds to build it. We can get them out quite quickly. And for Vasari Alliance, when we get to the 24% factory upgrade, that goes from 18 down to, I think, either 14 or 15. So it saves you 3 or 4 seconds per build. They do come from the nano assembly factory, as do all of our frigates and cruisers. So it would be competing for build time with light frigates, with raiders, with scouts, anything, well, basically anything that's tier 1 and tier 2. And then here's our, this is also tier 2, this is tier 1, this is the fabricator's now tier 2, and then the oppressor and the transporter in 3, and then the penetrator in 4. So very multi-purpose building that we've got going on here. But that's it, I think. Things to look out for. Against Vasari, you need to look out for when the evacuator uses subspace rupture. It did not change in the damage that the Defensor receives this patch, because damage rate for subspace rupture stayed at 12, 15, and 18 damage per second. Gravity warhead is going to be very difficult for the evacuator to hit on you, but what it does want to do is it does want your defensors to be stuck in the subspace rupture. So assuming that you do have both the shield regen and the hull regen, it's even with level 1 subspace rupture, it's still doing a solid 8 damage a second in an area, and it's not, I mean, it's pretty big, and really it's kind of the only way that a Vasari could fight Defensor versus Defensor if they're losing on their own supply. In the Vasari matchup, whoever has the most defensors is most likely going to win, just pretty much period. So even if you're down by a couple supply points, like if we're talking 60 versus 54 or something, that 54 should lose quite handily, and these ships in general just kind of snowball off of each other. The one thing I didn't get a chance to test is the new Vasari Interceptor versus the Defensor. So that's one I would like to do in the future. But the one test that I believe I did, it was a weird test because I was in the developer menu. But I think it was the tech carrier actually had the Interceptor come out of it. And the Defensors actually ended up holding their own against the Interceptor. It just took a while for them to eventually clear all them out of the air. But in general, there's just too much shield armor and hull on here for the Interceptor to easily get through. So for Vasari versus Vasari matchups, if you are behind on Defensor count at any point in any fight, you need to very quickly rectify that so that you don't lose out. Trying to think of what else. Defensors will beat the light frigate on the Vasari just because the light frigates can't turn quick enough to keep them in their firing reticle. The can rack is not as automatically a win as it used to be. The missiles that come out of there now have, I believe it's 9 health and 15 armor or something ridiculous like that. So it would take you a total of like 7 or 8 point defense shots to knock one missile out of the sky. That said, one defensor does not beat a can rack head-to-head. 2 defensors do knock the missile out of the air of the can rack. However, you're in an 8 supply versus a 6 supply issue because the can rack only costs 6. So you have to basically have a supply edge to fight out to get that point defense. And then any capital ships that add their own missiles to it, in a fight is going to also detract from it. So you'll have to even be that much more over the top when it comes to defensor count if you're trying to get as many missiles out of the air as you can. You do have to watch out for the Warden. Did not test the Warden versus the Defensor, but I can only imagine that it was going to be very similar to the Garda outcome. So expect basically you lose all of your defensors and they only lose maybe 30% of their of the Wardens. Against Advent, like I said, I think that overall the matchup is now favored for us. And then against Tech, unless they have a bunch of capital ships that have also gone fighter to help clear you out of the air, you can quite quickly overwhelm any of their point defense, any of their fighters, and continue on to beat their capital ships, beat their light frigates. You're not really afraid of most of their early stuff. The Gardas, I think, are strong, and I think that that's probably the best counterplay. The problem with the Advent is that their flak frigate doesn't come out until Tier 3, and chances are that unless they've spammed enough Tempests or drone hosts with just fighters to beat you, chances are that you're going to beat them as long as you've built enough defensors. Phase Resonance, we do still like the mobility on this one. As you saw, it is 960 move speed, which is not all the way up to light frigate, but it's getting dangerously close. Actually, let me double check that. Nope, same speed as a light frigate now. So it will keep pace with enemy light frigates. It'll get behind them while it's chasing, and if you have any of the mobility for max speeds, you pretty much catch the Tech and Advent ones as well as your own in a Vasari versus Vasari matchup. Combat, the reload, I don't know how necessary it is. You already have a 1.5 second reload on the point defense on this ship. So getting, let's say, we'll estimate 9 because it's easier to do the math. You go down from 1.5 to 1.35 reload speed, which I don't think is going to make or break your ship here. And then utility, this tree doesn't do anything for us. And then breakpoints, getting to the Tier 3 pulse weapon was the first time that your damage per shot went from 3 to 4 on certain missiles. So it would help you clear slightly quicker. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. So I think that the Defensor's still strong for us. I think in the right matchup, they are must builds, especially in the Vasari matchup. And I'm going to argue that they're probably must builds in the Advent matchup now as well. And then in the Tech matchup, you have to scout guard account. And the thing is they can build them. They can build Gardas as quickly as you can build Defensors. So it's based on whether or not one of you has scouted the other. And then I also forgot Advent Plasma Novas. They want to cycle Plasma Novas on you as much as they can just to deal damage to you. And then Tech want to cycle Radiation Bombs on you as well. I think our Pierce went up from 50 to 90 on the light pulse gun in the most recent patch. So I haven't tested these against capital ships, but because of the way durability works and because of the buff to overall capital ship survivability, I do expect these to do minimal damage to capital ships. But I'm curious to see how everybody else's tests are in their own games. So that's it that I've got for Defensor. Please leave a comment below if there's anything that I may have gotten right or wrong, or any of your personal feedback in any of your games. hopefully have another one out tomorrow for the probably do the light frigate tomorrow because we use so many of those. So hopefully that's it for today. Thanks.